Hey everyone, it's Chris. Today I have a couple of mixed media cards to share with you. I am going to be using my original Misty and these stamps from Unity Stamp Company, Catherine Girl and Harmony Girl, some Bristol Smooth paper, and I will be using my gel press. But first I'm going to be using some Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers to color. So I'm going to start out by stamping onto my Bristol card panel. I'm using VersaFine Black Onyx ink, and I have stamped my image, and then I covered it up with a piece of 2-inch 3M Post-it tape. This Post-it tape is going to become a mask for when I'm using my gel printing. So I just stamped it by using the residual ink that was left on my stamp. I didn't want to re-ink. I found that re-inking and stamping on the Post-it tape just kind of makes a mess. The Post-it tape doesn't handle the ink as well as a cardstock would, so it can kind of just sit on the surface and get your hands really dirty, and there is a good chance you're going to make a mess on your card panel. Even though I don't need these masks just yet, I'm going to cut them out now so they are ready to go. First, I am going to color my images onto my Bristol card panel. I'm using the Zig Clean Color markers, and I'm coloring a little bit direct to the paper, and then I'm using my Faber-Castell water brush to do most of the work, blending out that color for me. The coloring part goes very fast. The Bristol Smooth paper works quite well for the Zig Clean Color markers. They really do blend well on it, and with a little bit of water, you can really manipulate the color across your image quite easily. I'm not putting a lot of detail into my coloring. However, in the dress, I did want the illusion that she is walking in the rain and she is taking a big step forward with her right leg. So I have left that leg to be quite a bit lighter than the other, so it kind of looks like that leg is pushing forward and her knee is jutting out, pushing against the bottom of her dress. I'm just kind of scribbling in the color here for her hair. I'm using 3 different colors, kind of a mid-tone brown, a yellow, and just putting those dots in there. And now I'm adding a little bit more highlight, kind of blonde, because then when I add the water from my water brush, it's going to blend all those colors together and get kind of that orangey blonde, strawberry blonde hair. Now that image was finished, so now I'm going to move on to my second image. This one is going to be considerably lighter. This is kind of that spring thank you card, so I didn't want heavy colors, so I'm going to do very little direct to paper with my markers. Instead, I'm putting some ink onto my craft mat and using my water brush to just pick up the color. I'm working on kind of creating the illusion of features on this faceless Angie girl. I like to put a little bit of shadow just to create that dimension to a face, just by using a darker half of the face and leaving the other half lighter. It kind of just gives you that hint. You don't need to put the features or the details in there, but just having the kind of variation of color just gives that hint that there is a, kind of a dividing symmetry of line to the face, a little hint of nose. So it just gives a little more interest, I feel. And it's always a challenge for me to kind of create that illusion of a face. I'm adding some darker shadows on her sweater beneath where she's holding the flowers. I want a little bit of shadow there, kind of make that arm look like it's kind of forward, casting a little bit of shadow on the lower portion of her sweater. The jeans that she's wearing, I just left very pale and gave her some nice bright blue shoes. So very little coloring on that one. Now I'm ready to move to my gel press, but first I need to protect the areas that I just colored. So here is my gel press printing plate. It is a large sheet of gel, and I'm going to be putting some acrylic paint on it and using my brayer to mix colors together right onto this plate. And then I'm going to pick up the paint using my card front. So here I am using some burgundy, some blue, and lots of white. And I've just rolled that out to a nice thin layer, and I place my card front right on the top. I put a piece of like just typing paper over the top and use my brayer to evenly spread that paint onto my card front. I just peeled it up. I'm going to let that dry just briefly. And I'm using that leftover paint to do my second card front. This is my lighter spring card. And now I'm going to go back before it gets too terribly dry. I'm going to add a stencil and do a second printing on both cards. The first one, this is my Harmony Girl in the Rain, and I put this large polka dot stencil on the top. On my second card, I'm using this large bubble stencil, and I've peeled my mask up. I didn't let my acrylic paint dry too much. I wanted to make sure that that mask came up, so that's why I only used 2 printings on this. I didn't want too thick of paint. Now here I am adding some extra raindrops to my card front. I have watered down some silver paint, and I'm just kind of tapping it with a brush so that I'm getting spatters. And before those spatters can dry, I'm using a wide dry brush and just sweeping those little wet droplets down so I get kind of that look of driving rain. And now I'm going to add my sentiment. I'm using a sheet of Duralar as a practice sheet. So I'm stamping with my VersaFine onto that piece of Duralar, and then I can adjust my card front if I need to and figure out the placement of where I want my sentiment. Then once I know I have the right spot, I can just remove that piece of Duralar and stamp directly onto my card front. Because the acrylic paint on my card front now adds a little bit of texture, I had to stamp multiple times to make sure that I had the right coverage and the right darkness of that ink. Now I added a little bit more silver paint so it looks like she's kind of walking through a puddle, and that my card front is pretty much done there. Now I'm moving to the second one. I'm going to do the same idea with the Duralar. This time I've placed my stamp towards the middle of my MISTI, so I have lots of room to move this around because there are 3 parts to my sentiment for this card front. And I wanted to be able to manipulate my card beneath that stamped piece of Duralar to line up each portion of my sentiment. I want the second part of my sentiment, which says for everything you do. So I wanted to make sure that I use this little heart and that the word every from the second line of my sentiment, that I can place that right in the middle of that heart. So by using that piece of Duralar as kind of my guide and lining up my card base or card panel right behind that Duralar, then I can just remove the Duralar and stamp exactly where I want it to be. Now there are my finished card fronts. I'm going to trim those. On one I used a Spellbinders deckled rectangle die, and the other one I used a stitched full A2 front size. And then I'm just going to adhere them to card bases, and my cards are completed. So here I am just using a little bit of liquid glue and putting these together, and there are my finished cards. So thanks for watching my little mixed media adventure today. Have a great day.